One quick comment before we get to the story. Every American police officer should know that any mistake he or she makes involving violence toward a black suspect will now become a national story. Therefore, restraint and caution should be the order of the day. That being said, this program generally supports the police because we well understand the danger involved with the job. Last night in Charlotte, hundreds of people protested, some of them unlawfully, after police shot and killed 43-year-old Keith Scott.
In Charlotte, protesters throw rocks and water bottles at police, stomp on and damage vehicles. They block traffic on a major interstate, then grow in intensity.
They broke into the back of a tractor trailer and started setting items on fire.
16 police officers were injured, one hit in the face with a rock. The riot sparked by the fatal police shooting of 43-year-old Keith Lamont Scott Tuesday afternoon. In an emotional Facebook live stream, a woman who says Scott was her father claims he didn't have a gun, and if he did, the police planted it.
My daddy is definitely disabled. What gun he had? He in a damn car reading a book.
But the police say a gun was recovered and no book.
Former homicide detective Rod Wheeler. Rod, good to see you. Unfortunately, under these circumstances, how important right now is it for the police chief and for others to be as transparent as possible? We don't know all the facts yet. We have not seen the video, but for people to understand why they are protesting, how important is it to understand the facts here?
Oh, it's very important. As a matter of fact, if the police, the chief of police continue to communicate with the community there, then what he will find is that the community may kind of calm down in terms of the protest. That's very important in a situation like this. You have to be very transparent. You have to communicate. And you know what? The investigation must be very swift. Now, real quickly, something that nobody has talked about is the actual young police officer that fired his gun. Now, this police officer is going to be talked to today by the investigators there in Charlotte, but I just learned that the police officer is only a 2-year veteran of the force, so he is a relatively young officer, and that's going to definitely have a significant impact in this investigation.
What difference would that make then, only 2 years in? Would they be less prepared?
Right. No, not necessarily less prepared, but their experience level is going to be obviously lessened. And so as a result of that, you got older officers, more seasoned officers on the scene, which we saw yesterday, and they didn't fire their weapons, but the younger officer did. So the question is going to come up as to whether or not this officer should have been released from being on probation, which he was on probation for a year before he was released to be out there on his own.
And the officer in question already well known within the community before he became a police officer for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department as well.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit more about why the videotape itself has not been released yet, just so people understand. The governor of North Carolina just in July passed this law, or signed it into law, where video, also audio, cannot be released readily.
Right, and you know what? That video needs to be released because that's going to be critical in terms of keeping the community calmed down, because if they do have the video, and the chief of police said yesterday that they do have video from body cameras that was not worn by the officer that did the shooting, but worn by other officers, they need to release that because apparently those videos show where this individual did have a weapon in his hand when the officer fired that fatal shot yesterday.
I've had grown African-American men be on the phone with me crying, literally crying their heart out because they don't understand how one person could be gunned down right in front of all of those police officers. And that's something that we cannot tolerate here in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Officer Shelby's attorney claims Crutcher was reaching inside his car for a weapon when the officer pulled the trigger. Attorney Benjamin Crump, who represents Crutcher's family, says the window of the car was rolled up.
And this is the objective video frame that shows the window was up. So how could he be reaching into the car if the window is up and there's blood on the glass?
There are two reasons we're seeing so much of this death at the hands of police officers. First is the most obvious. It's the elephant in the room. There's racism that goes on. Second is that we've dangerously undertrained and unprepared our police officers in this country. Those are the things the Department of Justice admits, but they haven't done anything about it.
Violence has erupted for a second night in the US city of Charlotte following a fatal shooting of a black man by police. Protesters are angry that 43-year-old Keith Lamont Scott was killed by officers on Tuesday. At one point, City Hall announced on social media that one person had been taken to hospital and was on life support, but he was not dead as previously reported. After several hours of clashes between police and protesters, the state governor declared a state of emergency.
Try to grab those people.
The Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department can actually work the street, clear the street, the sidewalks, and make the appropriate arrest when necessary, while hopefully the guard that will be coming into the city during the evening will be protecting any buildings and assets so the police can do their job.
Basically, we were following the crowd all the way down to this part of downtown. At one point, people got really agitated. There were trash cans thrown from the top of the mall, and then they came here. And as you can see, people are trying to damage these vans. So far, they've put out, oh wow. They've put out a pepper spray. People are running from it. Jerry, get out of there! Jerry, get out of there! So as you can tell, the situation is totally out of control. So there were agitators that were getting pulled in by police, and a couple people started sitting down, but police grabbed one, and that's when everything just went out of control. You can see police are trying to control the situation, but there's tear gas everywhere. People started launching the tear gas back at the police. Hey, watch out, there's gas under you. Get out of there. There are more cans of tear gas getting thrown into the street right now, Anderson, and we're trying to get out of the way. So there were two lines. Oh, my eyes. There were.
Look at that, the looting. North Carolina is under a state of emergency now as a second night of violence and chaos erupts there in Charlotte.
Last night, 4 police officers were hurt as nearly 1,000 rioters and protesters took to the streets throwing fireworks, looting stores, blocking traffic.
Police were badly outgunned, outnumbered. They brought in the National Guard now as the cavalry has arrived. Last night, you can look at some of the pictures there as the police took a real beating for a couple of hours as things kicked off here before 4 police officers got hurt. A number of people got arrested. A number of the protesters are talking about this man, Keith Scott.
Now on the phone is the governor of the great state of North Carolina, Pat McCrory. McCrory is with us, and he has just as of now declared a state of emergency.
More than 1 million customers are without power in Puerto Rico after a fire at a power plant led to a collapse of the electrical system. The island's only power company says it's investigating after a fault on 2 transmission lines impacted customers across the island. Firefighters tweeted the fire has been controlled. More than 3 million people live on the island. No word yet on how long it will take to restore power. Airports, police stations, and water plants are expected to receive first priority when power is restored.
A fire at the main power plant on the Caribbean island of Puerto Rico has left 1.5 million people without electricity. Authorities say the outage caused another 15 fires across the U.S. territory because of malfunctioning generators. Heavy storms have been affecting the area where the power plant is located on the south of the island. The power company has been struggling with a $9 billion U.S. debt, and management says it needs more revenue to update what it says is old equipment. The blackout brought traffic chaos, and many train services in the capital San Juan were cancelled. Local media reported that firefighters had put out the blaze, but it was not clear when full power would be restored.
Lake Como has a reputation for being a playground for the rich and famous, but it's become one of the front lines for Europe's migrant crisis. With the Swiss border now closed to migrants, Como, Italy has become a bottleneck for those looking to reach northern Europe. Each day, many attempt the short journey. Almost all are returned. The small station is crammed with migrants sleeping rough. Others have set up camp in the adjoining park.
At least 20 civilians have been killed by an airstrike in Yemen. According to local officials, the strike by the Saudi-led coalition hit a residential area of the Red Sea port city, Hodeidah. Leaders of the Houthi militia are thought to occupy the city's presidential palace. The fighting between the Saudi-led coalition and Iran-allied Houthi rebels has killed upward of 10,000 since 2015, many of those being civilians, with air raids hitting hospitals, markets and even schools.
By the thousands, dead fish floating in the water along Hingham Harbor, as far as the eye could see.
I started noticing all these dead fish, and I've lived here 15 years and I've never seen that.
The unnerving sight startling Jane Cahill during a morning kayak.
And I look around and I notice there are thousands of dead fish.
Implementing ambitious development goals has been a major theme at this year's UN General Assembly. China's premier told world leaders that China is already moving its plan forward and will help the rest of the world to do so too.
We are one of the first to submit to the United Nations the national plan on the implementation of the agenda. Sustainable development is first and foremost about development, and development underpins every human achievement. Without development, nothing can be sustainable. The lack of development is often at the root of many of the world's problems, be it poverty, or the refugee crisis, or conflicts, or terrorism.
Terrorism and growing insecurity from Syria to the Korean Peninsula threatened that development. China said the United Nations is the only legitimate body for tackling these issues. In the United Nations Security Council, foreign ministers tried to revive the ceasefire in Syria and the prospects of humanitarian corridors out of Aleppo for civilians trapped in rebel-held sectors where the fighting is most intense. China's foreign minister called for more international cooperation.
I'm over here at UN.org, agenda of the 71st regular session here. To be honest, some of the wording is raising some eyebrows. Number 15 is the first. It states the role of the United Nations in promoting a new global human order. This is what they're going to be discussing here. Their new world order, this globalization. And they even go on to talk here about sustainable development, the implementation of Agenda 21. And they have it written right here. They want to further Agenda 21, and they want to push this sustainable development. Okay, and it's some of their key goals here. And number 20, implementation of the outcomes of the United Nations Conference on Human Settlements. Why do they keep using the word human as if they're not?
Dozens of people have been killed in Indonesia after flash floods and landslides hit the cities of Garut and Sumedang in West Java province. Rivers overflowed and floodwaters reached up to 2 meters after just 3 hours of rainfall. Friends and relatives of people missing in the floods gather at this hospital. They search a board for names of their loved ones.
Breaking right now, U.S. forces at a base in northern Iraq have come under ISIS rocket attack, and U.S. officials tell Fox News traces of a, quote, mustard agent are believed to be present. If confirmed, this would be the first chemical attack on U.S. forces in Iraq since returning in 2014. No American troops were hurt, we're told. They do have chemical weapons exposure suits there. An initial test on the substance came back positive, we're told, but military officials could not say that could end up being false.
Computer and tech giant Microsoft believes their new technology will help solve cancer in the next 10 years. Yes, solve cancer. They plan on treating cancer the same way they treat a virus that has invaded your computer. Scientists at Microsoft say they're working on a sort of nanotechnology that would be able to identify the cancerous cells individually and put a stop to their growth, actually reprogram that rogue cell from within the human body. Dr. David Heckerman, senior director of the genomics group at Microsoft, says, "We're in a revolution with respect to cancer treatment. Even 10 years ago, people thought that you treat the tissue. You have brain cancer, you get brain cancer treatment. You have lung cancer, you get lung cancer treatment. Now we know it's just as, if not more important, to treat the genomics of cancer, which genes have gone bad in the genome." Researchers at Microsoft say that doctors and scientists are at a stage in history where we have more information than is humanly possible to process when it comes to cancer. So they're working on a cloud computing system along with other programs that will help design precision treatment for individual people. They believe that their technology will be able to process the massive amounts of data available, pair it with individual patients' prognosis, and be able to develop more accurate models on how to treat the problem and essentially reprogram those cancerous cells.
Now to a giant eyesore that is being called the world's worst repair job. The Great Wall of China, one of the most famous landmarks on Earth, now looks drastically different from its construction 700 years ago. Efforts to repair a large stretch of it shows a smooth white trail of cement. Look at that, erasing the original appearance and character. The repairs were made in 2014, but it seems the public is just now starting to notice. This extreme facelift has social media buzzing with ridicule and outrage at the new changes. Some pushing for regulation in restoration efforts. Seems like a smart idea.
It's a public property.
It's illegal to take my picture personally. It is illegal. Did you get any documentation? I'm allowed you to take my picture?
No, but you're on public property.
No,
therefore, you have no reasonable
property.
You have no reasonable expectation of privacy.
Not yet. I got the camera.
Okay, so the protester is right this round. You can film on public property. You do not need permission to film someone on public property. And by the way, officer, state property is public property.
One district in Pennsylvania's policy refuses kids a hot meal if their parents owe more than $25.
And that is why a cafeteria worker says she quit her job because she just couldn't take it.